to order today on January 27th, 2020. And can we start the Pledge of Allegiance? Are there any changes or additions to the agenda?
No, Corey, we are all set with the agenda as presented.
Next, any public comment? No? All right. Then we're on to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And we're on to discussion items, which would be 6.1, the middle school philosophy. This is long.
We have a team ready to present to you board tonight. Steph's going to be the facilitator for the team, and we're excited about the work that we've been doing over these past, actually board almost 6 months now that we've been working on this. Steph, whenever you're set, kiddo.
Okay, thank you. So is this loud enough, or do I need to raise this, Jordan? Are we good? Okay, so Mr. Hoover mentioned that we have a team with us tonight. So we have some middle school teachers and some 5th and 6th grade teachers who, when you ask questions, we will reference them as well, who they may be able to answer some of your questions. So this team started working together based on some conversations that had happened at the end of last school year. So we want to just talk a little bit about our philosophy around bringing 6th grade back up to the middle school as they had been. Right behind you.
Do we need to manually control it here from the computer for you?
Thank you, yes. Okay. I'm going to stop. You go ahead.
They have way too much fun with that.
Trigger finger.
Go ahead. Just hit it. Thank you. Okay. So last year there have been some conversations around bringing 6th graders up to the middle school. Mike, sorry. I'm going to stand over here, though. Thank you. And so we got together with a team of current 5th and 6th grade teachers, current middle school teachers, Tarina, myself, and John, to talk about what would be the rationale. Why was there a conversation last year? Was it a conversation that we needed to continue? And if so, what would be the purpose behind that? So we started meeting back in the fall. We've had 3 meetings where we have talked about what this rationale would be. And really what it came down to in our conversations is what would be best for students' social and emotional and developmental needs. That was really the driving force of the conversation, which was sparked, though, by concerns among the 5th and 6th grade, specifically 6th grade teachers, with regard to gaps in curriculum. So we then started looking at what would be some student supports that would be equitable for all kids, what would be some room assignments that we might look at, what would enrollment look like, what could support services be, and then what would our curriculum and materials and professional training need to be for us to be able to do the move.
So the first thing we wanted to look at was the kids and looking what's best for Glen and looking at tween and teen health. So if anybody has had a tween or a teen and raised a teen, you know that this is, besides the first few years of their life, the biggest change that they're going to go through. And I'll speak from, you can read the bullet points on the overhead, but I taught middle school for 11 years, and I was principal in middle school for 5 years. single day, just the growth of got the gray hairs in middle school, just because of the enormous changes that you will see both cognitively, socially, and physically in that age group. And so if you look, according to research, and as we see, children are really becoming from egocentric, where you know when they're little ones and everything is about them, and are all starting to be cognizant of those around them. Those of you again who raise someone in their age group, everything is about friends. Everything is it becomes more appearance based. So people looking at who am I, trying to define who they are. So last week they might have been in all black, and then this week, you know, they are trying out for band. They're trying to figure out who they are. We had a conversation in the counseling department about some students in sixth grade. It's like, who are the best friends? And someone said, yeah, that's month. Because changes are happening so quick. They're also developing, because they're mature, they're figuring out their work habits, developing work habits, time management, organizational skills. They're navigating the social dynamics with group activity. And they are starting to recognize who kind of matches their personality. Who are they feeling themselves with? What is themselves? They're still trying to navigate that as well. Risky behaviors, conflicts with parents, mood. I know your deal. Yes, but if you can imagine all of the changes going on inside, they don't know what's going on. They don't realize they're feeling what they're feeling, but they are. And as you can see, they're trying to move toward independence. But here's the thing that I always tell parents: let them be there. Don't just let them go, because they still need you. They still need your guidance. They're still going to come to you when they're ready. They still need
So in our conversations then, we looked specifically at this population of students in this age group, these sixth graders who are more like our middle school students developmentally than they are like their elementary school peers where they're currently spending their time. So what were some of the other conversations that we had? Well, one of the things that came up that came up in our conversations was that if sixth grade were in the middle school, it would allow for a more fluid math curriculum available to them. Currently, we have sixth graders who come up to the middle school when they're accelerating for math. If they were to be in the middle school, those math opportunities would be more readily available to more students who needed them. They'd have greater elective options. Currently, our 7th and 8th graders go through something called an elective rotation. They do six-week mini hits of different electives that they can choose from. And so our sixth graders would have the opportunity to do that exploration as well. And those include everything from environmental science to journalism to, Bethany, what are some of the? Mock trial is a big one, yes. So our sixth grade, yeah, they'd have more opportunity to explore more of their areas of interest, which fits developmentally with where they are and trying to figure out what they like and who they are. They would also have PE every day. In our ideal world, every student in my brain would have PE like 5 out of the 6 hours, but we can't do that. So allowing students who need that physical outlet, and I believe that every child, especially in this developmental stage, needs the physical activity. They need that physical exertion to go along with all the mental stuff that they're going through. We see a lot of social and behavioral concerns in sixth graders that mirror more what are happening in the 7th and 8th grade than what are happening in the 4th and 5th grades, for example. It's developmentally more appropriate for them. This is a big one. Right now, there's a gap between 5th grade and 7th grade in regards to published materials for students. So most of the elementary school curriculum that's on the market is K-5 curriculum. And most of the middle school curriculum is 6, 7, 8 curriculum. So having sixth graders at the elementary school leaves sort of am I an elementary student doing elementary work, or am I a middle school student doing middle school work? It fits better with regard to the published materials that are out there for students specifically in the 4 core areas. The maturity level is a better match for middle school. They would also have an increased opportunity for team sports and extracurricular activities. Our sixth graders get to participate in our middle school sports. They would, and they do now, but our belief is that we'd have more of them participating if they were actually with those middle school students. And this last point is a really big one for us. We've talked, the elementary school teachers have talked about the need for some social emotional activities and learning and curriculum at the elementary school. We have that with our middle school curriculum. We follow that Castle curriculum. We have advisory every single day. That period is built in, and we believe that for sixth graders, having that opportunity to be with one trusted adult every single day, working on specifically social emotional development, would be huge for their integration into the middle school. Additionally, seventh and eighth graders can serve as their role models. Currently, sixth graders are sort of at the top of the pecking order down at the elementary school, but they're relatively far removed from those kindergartners. So really, it's maybe those fifth graders that they're serving as the role models for. We need those fifth graders to step up a little more. We need our sixth graders in that middle school where they would have the seventh and eighth grade role models. The interesting thing right now is our sixth graders are basically on a middle school schedule. They rotate with their fifth grade peers through their 4 core academic areas anyway. Realistically speaking, the physical change is just a different hallway. The movement of their day and their activities with the addition of advisory would look relatively similar. They'd be challenged to step up and really sort of face that storm and stress developmental time period. And they would have, in our middle school, we have something called the Middle School Pride, where they focus on specific social emotional development ideas, engagement, integrity, respect. Those things, they would be expected to, what's the word that I want? Those are the kinds of qualities that we're trying to develop in our middle school students. And today, as a matter of fact, we celebrated a Pride Day. Teachers recognize students when they catch them doing something well. They get a little pride ticket, and then once a month we do a celebration for students who've earned a pride ticket. So today we had ice cream for kids who had received this. So it's a way to encourage those very traits that we're trying to develop in that age group.
So not only is this your child's biggest change in their life as they hit school, but this is your time going through it, it's yours too. And so we want to honor those concerns and how scared you're acting. And these are some potential concerns that have come up. So it can be intimidating for sixth graders to switch classes. So this won't be. So they can switch classes already. The impact of social media exposure on younger kids. So there's a concern that they might have more access to or more exposure to social media during the day, but during the school day, the fact that they're not allowed to. So they're not allowed to have access to that. They still have their Chromebook and their phone. Will they lose enrichment time? So you know how important that is in the elementary model? We have enrichment time where they can get extra help. That's the middle school too, academic support, enrichment opportunities. Which also goes into, so no homeroom. Well, they have secondary advisory. So again, in secondary advisory, we address social emotional, we address homework time, we enrichment support. We address clubs where they get to traveling activities that they like to do. So we have all that. The fear of change, that's a big one. So we want to honor our parents and how they're feeling. We want to honor our students and how they're feeling. Elementary might. This is a new frontier. No tutoring opportunities. Elective options. So in the elementary, our sixth graders currently get what? So they get the same 5 that the rest of their adults get. Whereas if they send it out, grade or extra. So much. And then lots of field trip opportunities. You know that young graders are young 5s going on field trips. They don't lose that when they grow up. Did you want to talk about the possibilities?
Yeah, so we had talked in our last board meeting about the potential for each grade level to have a discrete trip. And so we've outlined a 5th through 12th grade potential travel schedule for students and what each sort of cornerstone activity would be for students at each grade level, which we'll present to you at the next board meeting. But the idea is that it wouldn't go away, and all of our middle school teachers schedule field trips and extracurricular experiences that match their curriculum. So if anything, I think they would probably have greater exposure to opportunity if they were in the middle school than they do in the 6th grade.
One other thing I'd like somebody who, you know, love my kids, and it's like, get my kids. No matter what, you're getting my kids, if it's fifth or sixth grade or something, you know, or seventh. And the way I started looking at it as in what is best for kids, what's best for them, and kids. If we do put sixth grade in the middle school, it's just double first. And because we're all really nice to them, a lot of way because now sixth graders support them because they have a way. And put it out earners.
So, in this preparing students for the transition, we would be hosting, as we do now, right? We host sixth graders into a transition when they're leaving for seventh grade. We would just be adding fifth grade to that. So fifth and sixth graders would have orientation this upcoming school year so that everybody would get a sense for who the teachers are, where their rooms are, what would their schedule look like. And I was talking to Bethany today. Do you want to speak to the activities that we do to bring those kids up?
Yeah, we do,
You want to come to a mic?
Or I can bring him on.
Sorry.
we do, at least 3 different meetings with, right now, the sixth graders, they're coming up to be our seventh graders. They get paired up with students that have already been in school, so they have, they have questions, what it's like, and what's your favorite part of the day or whatnot, which we would just do another grade for that. They do a tour with their, match here, and they go find different areas in our building. Like we are in the same building, but it's a little bit intimidating to be in this hallway, to be honest. The guidance office is the secondary office where they go sick. So they learn that, the locker rooms, and that they change clothes for PE. So they go in with their buddy and see the locker room, and it's like intimidating. And they do have to, they are encouraged to bring deodorant and things. And then we do one at the end, which is a panel of students that are already middle schoolers, and they talk and take questions about what their life and all about their schedule. So I have we just sit after every grade. So really get them comfortable, familiar. They meet the teachers when they go along on their tour. So it's really kind of fun. You know, I wanted to add too, I think that if we have sixth graders up here, we do quite a bit with career options. And we do some career lessons through a really cool program called Mellow. And I think that gets a little bit lost in the elementary. It goes up in some career lessons up to a sixth grade, but I think we'd be able to embrace them a little bit with some career lessons. We're really proud of the idea of possible.
Thank you. Okay, so the other thing that we just wanted to mention is they're still with their same peer group. It's not like they're leaving the building and going with totally new students as well. And they would have the same teachers. So they'll know those teachers because we'll be bringing those teachers up to the middle school. So they would actually leave the high school wing and come to the middle school wing, and the kids would see the same people. So there's a little bit of safety net, especially in that first transition year when we'd be bringing fifth and sixth grade. And then Bethany, we'll let you talk about this. So what we thought of was, what would a sample schedule look like if we brought sixth graders to the middle school? And from my perspective, one of the great benefits of this is that it allows for more flexibility in the schedule for middle schools because we'll have more sections, so we can offer more electives and move teachers around to do a little bit more with our offerings. So these are just some samples. Bethany, you want to just tell them really quickly?
Yeah, so it's just a sample of maybe 4 different students. So one that has band might look like this. We have 6 classes in our day plus advisory. And so you would get all of your 4s plus P plus band. And we did the rotation, which was the 6-week rotation electives. You know, you might have scheduled them with something like this. Our special ed students, of course, we have time with their support teacher. And I did one just in case we have some kids, like we do, that are in advanced math
And so at this time, I wanted to just introduce some of our teachers. If you guys would come on up who worked on the committee, and I would like to open this up for you to ask them questions about the conversations that we've been having, middle school and elementary, please. And so you have to talk into a mic and introduce yourself if you're going to answer a question. You can come to both. Thank you. Right here, Snowy. So if you have any questions for our team?
I have one. Has sixth grade ever been in middle school here?
I'm Lisa Nadlicki, and I'm the middle school language arts teacher. And approximately 8 to 10 years ago, sixth grade was part of the middle school. I hired in '95, and the year before my current college-age student was going to come up, the shift went down. It was very disappointing. So we have lived that, and Heidi, you can help me. Heidi and I have been here a long time, but we lived it with great success. I would say that the mentoring that went on with the older students to the younger, so 8th grade to 7th grade and so forth, was great. This will sound kind of corny, but I like to use analogies. And to me, when 6th graders are in the elementary, they're like this flower that's ready to bud, okay? Their hormones are going crazy. They don't know where they belong. Who do they mentor? They're too big for this, too young for that. And to me, when they come up to the middle school, then, they can spread their wings and figure it out in a more reasonable fashion, in my opinion.
What was the rationale, 8 years ago for shifting it from middle school to elementary?
Careful.
So there was one big change is the change in administration. So Dennis Burton was leaving and Kim Wright. There was just a change, and it seemed like there was support from a few people coming in to make that change. So that and there were also Kim's one of them. He had a daughter who's going to 6th grade with 5 staff people that had kids going in 6th grade, and I don't know if that played into the dynamics of why it moved down there, or I don't think they didn't have a secondary principal at that time, where it was kind of tenuous, wasn't it? But Kim was a known quantity, and she was down here, and she was kind of sucking up some of the responsibility too. So it was a way to kind of alleviate another grade level to keep an eye on, and she could monitor it down in 6th grade.
So they didn't go through a process like this?
Oh, no. It just
Okay.
kind of happened. Actually, what happened is when we found out, all the staff people in the middle school, and I would say pretty much everybody in Upper L, filled into the room and said, we don't think this is best for kids. We told everybody that would listen to us, and then it happened anyways. Is that pretty accurate?
That is very accurate.
So what is the cell phone rules in middle school? What are the rules?
Well, right now, kids can have their phones until first hour starts, and then they have to have their phones away at all times until lunch. They can have them out during lunch, and then just not during class at all. So before school, lunch, and after school.
So they can't listen to music during certain times when they're just doing study hall or something like that? I know we don't have study hall, but
Probably up to the discretion of the teacher, but I think no. You got to help me on that one.
Yeah, so what I've told staff, and we have a couple of students, for example, that have maybe some accommodation plans that allow for them to have music. And so my guideline to our teachers is that if they have music on their Chromebook, they may have their headphones plugged into the music, but they may not have their phones out. I can't monitor what's happening on the phone, I can monitor what's happening on the Chromebook. So if it's in the classroom setting during a quiet work time and the music is on the Chromebook, they may use their headphones, otherwise no.
so we have space, room space, and we have locker space.
Used to be a lot
Bigger
of
locker.
kids, 3 sections. When I was down there at each grade level. So, I mean,
You have
you have
lots of space.
rooms that are being used in different ways now than they were before. Don Miller was in the closet down there. And,
I was in the
right.
closet once.
Yeah, right. So, I mean,
We have a whole half a hallway of lockers that are empty.
I was looking around, in my memory, having been the high school counselor, and also at one point I was 8th grade counselor, it's exactly as they're saying it was. It appeared to be going along smoothly. People were, there weren't complaints that I heard, and suddenly there was a monumental change. I've worked in districts as a school counselor where 6th was in, the elementary, and where 6th was in the middle. And I think an educated person could make a case for either. But I think it's been very successful here when it was in the middle school. And this looks like it was such a thoughtful process. Thank you.
Yeah, you've alleviated my concerns about the 6th graders moving up. I think it looks like a great opportunity for them. I think the advisory seems like a really important piece. I love that advisory exists, but I think especially for these 6th graders. Will you talk about how that's done? It's a group, they're not only with 6th graders, the advisory is like 6th, 7th, 8th. How does it work? How will it work?
Right now, our advisories are 7th and 8th, of course, and it's about half and half for 10 to each adult. So I have an advisory and I love it. And so I have about 5 7th graders and 5 8th graders, our 6th graders, and we truly become like family. We look forward to seeing each other every day, check in, how are you, how's it going, how was your weekend, and we weave in our SEL lessons that the committee puts together, and sometimes we have conflict with it at that level, but that's not a problem. And then we have 2 academic days, so Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm still at the time, so I have to take those from get your book, and they come in and they have something to work on, or they can read more color. They don't have any missing work, and I check as their advisory teacher on their missing work and point out to them how to go that falling down. And then on Fridays, we have
Or they can go see a teacher for help.
or they can go see a teacher for help, correct. We have coupons that they get ahead of time, so if somebody needs to go see Mrs. Napoli to finish a test or a quiz or a project, they show it to me as their advisory teacher, and I sign it, and so I don't have to glance it, and they run off and spend that advisory 25 minutes time with. So that often happens, maybe out of 10 kids, I probably get 3 on academic days that are going to finish testing or whatever. And then on Fridays, we have clubs, so the kids got to put their hat in on any kind of club idea, and we narrowed it down, and each of us takes a club on Fridays, and their kids, and they pretty much run it. We're just there to guide them a little bit, so they love the club day as well. And I would love to have the 6th graders at maybe 13, maybe not even that many. So it's still be a great size group to handle and build a
Well, I do want to add, I think another great benefit of the 6th grade moving up is it's their time to start having some ownership of what they're doing. Middle school is all about figuring out who you are, what can I do, when I fall down, how do I pick myself up? We're there for them always, but really guiding that process so that, when they move on up into high school where the credits start counting, and that focus changes a little bit, they're prepared for it. And I just, from what I'm hearing about the 6th grade, the current group, I think that ownership is really what they need to grab hold of. So just another thought there, but I thought of that when you mentioned the clubs. The kids decided the clubs, which is just so cool. And they're fun for us too. I'm in art club on Friday. I so look forward to that. So it's very fun.
I'd also like to add, I'm a high school teacher as well, so I have a high school advisory, but it's even worked in my group. I know that parents are concerned about tutoring. I've paired up my older kids with my younger kids, and sometimes during academic time, I've got an older kid helping a younger kid with math or whatever, so that works out well. Awesome.
And lunch is just the middle schoolers?
Well, there's not a lot of time between different grades coming through.
Okay, yeah.
We go at 11:04.
All right.
So there is some overlap, so right now the middle schoolers, you see some of our sixth graders in the lunchroom. So, yeah,
About 10
there's-
minutes.
is that what it is?
About that. Okay. Not much.
So there is, so they do get to, so not again, not a huge school, because they will see them.
Yeah.
I think they get time in the gym after they eat dinner together too, so they're already pretty familiar.
Yeah, and so part of the wellness committee work is to provide students opportunity during lunch for either physical activity indoors or outdoors, or time for them to socialize. We know that that socialization is huge. One of the things that we were really proud about this year was being able to extend our lunch period for 30 to 35 minutes. It had been, I think, around 22, so it gives kids a really nice long time. Even 10 minutes in line still leaves them 25 minutes to eat and to socialize. So middle school students can go to the middle school gym where it's supervised. They can go to the dojo. They can play card games or board games together. And in the spring, Amy's committee has written a grant, or had written a grant that provided for some outdoor games. So when the weather gets a little bit nicer, we'll be able to let kids to go outside the auditorium and play. I wouldn't call it recess, but just to get out some energy.
Right. The daily PE, like right now, sixth graders have recess twice a day, but it's unstructured and they're kind of lost out there on the playground, and they're getting in a lot more trouble than they need to be. So the daily PE is structured movement for them, but then this lunchtime also, where they're with their peers and they're doing big kid stuff in the gym or outside. They're not on the elementary playground with all the little kids, with little kid expectations when these great big bodies.
You guys, I can tell you put a lot of work into this and are really passionate as a group. It's awesome. You've answered a lot of questions, I think. So what's the best argument against this?
I think the listeners presented up here, where they kind of did a pretty good job of addressing all of it. We tried to brainstorm those, and I think it just kind of depends on who you talk to, a month ago or a year ago as to what the concerns were. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I would say that when you do a really deep dive into research, there are conflicting reports. There are many, many schools across the country that have moved to a middle school model. It took shape right around the early to mid 90s. It was the thing. Let's get rid of junior high and go to middle schools. And so there has been some research out there that would suggest that test scores, for example, with sixth graders tend to be better when they're in an elementary school than a middle school. But when you look at the conditions of the students that, so how do I say this? So contextually, we don't match the framework of the schools that were in those studies. So we're a small rural school where kids know everybody. We're not a big urban district. We don't have thousands of kids. Some of the constraints of those research studies that resulted in that data aren't necessarily relevant to us. So you can go out there and look, and you'll find a study by Duke that's well quoted. You'll find another study from Tennessee that talked about social emotional development as well. But those schools also didn't have a social emotional curriculum. They didn't have advisory. So some of the things that I think led to some of those results, we have already dealt with, and we have foundational things in place that I think would make those results irrelevant to us.
In thinking about your question, Jason, looking at, I think one of the biggest hardships to overcome is parent sentiment. Because to many parents, and myself as the parent of two, middle school, though it is wonderful, and this is not my original line, it was a parent saying it to me as a middle school counselor in Cincinnati, Jenna, it feels like the black hole of education to me. They go in and they come out, and there's this period where they don't talk enough, and I don't know enough, and and yet this friend of mine was sharp enough to say, but boy, they get to ninth grade and they do seem really well prepared. So what I love about Glen Lake and this whole proposal is that the things that would make a parent concerned, it's too big, they're going to be, mixed in too broadly. When you think about next year, they're going to be with the kids they're with now and one other grade. Yeah. What a gentle transition. And they're going to have advisory that's thinking specifically about how to overcome any insecurities that a child would have going into that bigger setting. And, it's so far different than, some of the schools that I've seen in Seattle where my daughter had worked, where there's, 3,000 in the middle school.
Well, and we were intentional when we looked at rooms. We have a space between the counseling and athletic offices and then the 7th and 8th grade classroom wings where there are very few classrooms being used as classrooms. So we intentionally talked about putting the 6th grade in that space. So they'd come off the bus, they'd go through the dojo, they'd pass the adults, and they'd be right in their classroom area. The only classroom they would have to cross the double doors for would be their science lab, but we've already talked to Mr. Hobbins, and he's happy to give up his science lab and move down the hallway to the 2nd science lab so that those 6th graders can all have those classrooms right there in the same space. The only up and down the hallway they'd be going is if they had an advisor farther down the hallway or if they had one of the elective classes. But their 4 core would be up in the front with each other near the offices of the administrators.
So if I understood correctly, we already have a middle school curriculum in the 6th grade. And you're just changing locations. Yeah, it's real estate.
What we don't currently have in the 6th grade is an SEL program. So the elementary curriculum goes through 5th grade, and then middle school and high school has their SEL, and so 6th grade, it's like we're on this island lost by ourselves right now, doing the best we can to, so that, having the advisory in the 6th grade up in the middle school will just be brought in and have that opportunity too.
I feel like the timing is good for this in the sense that so much attention is so much is being invested in the middle school right now. I do feel like they have lots of opportunities, like again with advisory and the clubs, but like with the field trips, with all. I feel like this is a good, very supportive time to bring these 6th graders back up. And I actually didn't realize that so many of you had actually taught middle school before. Right, exactly. That's so true.
We're gonna just keep on going. Senior, can you do high school? So I have to agree with Brooke. Number one, I will have a child that will go up to the junior high potentially. And the concerns that I had, you guys did so well totally putting my mind at ease, really. These potential concerns, did a great job. I trust all of you wholeheartedly. We have wonderful everybody here.
Well, thank you for that.
Yes.
And I wanted to just mention too that we know that once this conversation occurred, there will be talk among families in the community as we expect. So we have already scheduled a parent Q&A session for next Monday evening. So any parent who hears this, who has any questions at all, I'll be sending out that communication tomorrow morning and inviting them next Monday evening just for a very casual, grab a cup of coffee. We will all be here, answer any questions that you have. There won't be a formal presentation, but we'll be available to answer any questions for parents that they might have.
Right, and that would have been one of my other questions, and you've already answered that, which is great, is to be able to give the opportunity for the concerned parent.
For sure.
To have their concerns listened and answered. And the one question I had with the social aspect of it, so right now it's 7th and 8th grade. I don't know socially what they do for fun, but dances, whatnot, would they be included with 6th, 7th, 8th?
at the end of the year, in the spring, they've always invited the sixth graders to come to the lab.
Oh, okay.
So
All right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the bowling trip, for example, we would take them bowling. Yeah, right, we had a bowling trip, which is the whole middle school. So they would,
Right.
well, they'd be part of the middle school.
Right.
Just a professional development question. So for the teachers who go from elementary to middle school, is there like continuing ed piece to this? Is there different accreditation? Is there anything that we would expect that the teacher, a change in the staffing we need to address? Or do we need to help? I mean, are you guys ready for that? I mean, it seems like you are. Is there a change in terms of your professional work that would need to be supported, you know, at a different point, or is that a different conversation?
You know, with our certification, how the state of Michigan gives us what we are able to do. In the middle school, we'd have to be teaching in our highly qualified areas. And so I'm highly qualified to teach language arts and science. It's what I've done in my previous life. So that's what I would be able to do in the middle school. I know David
I'm social studies and K-12 art.
and
So we all have that experience.
You guys are excited about that as being your primary focus work?
Yeah.
Okay, it's worth asking, right?
get to read.
Okay.
Well, and the other side of that, you know, so as the administrator, when we're building a schedule for next year, we want to offer the courses that students want to sign up for. And so it's conceivable that we might have a teacher who's currently teaching sixth grade who next year might end up teaching an eighth grade elective or an eighth grade section of math if they're qualified to do that. So middle school certification means that sixth, seventh, or eighth grade is fair game for their teaching assignment, as would it be for current seventh and eighth grade teachers who were certified to do 6, 7, or 8. So there would be much more flexibility from our perspective with regard to how we schedule. You heard David say he's certified K-12 art. Right now we share an art teacher with the elementary school, which gets in the way of our scheduling. Well, if David's in the middle school, we just now have an art teacher that we don't have to share with elementary. It provides us more flexibility in scheduling as well. Do you have any other questions for us?
I think that you guys have done a really impressive job of thinking this through. I taught sixth grade for a lot of years, and I think that it really makes sense to put sixth grade with seventh and eighth grade. That was how it always was in the schools I was in, and I think it really makes sense developmentally. And I commend you for really thinking about that aspect. Like, I think you guys did a really thorough job of thinking this through. So, yeah, nice job.
Stephanie, would you take a minute and talk to the board about the time frame that we're looking at, and especially as it revolves around scheduling for next fall, please?
Okay, so everybody take a deep breath. I intentionally scheduled the parent meeting for next Monday because our counselors are going to start scheduling our juniors, sophomores, and freshmen in the second week of February. In order for us to build the schedule, the sooner we have the decision, the better, so that we can flesh out which teachers are going to be teaching what their room assignments look like. If we're going to do it, we have to work really closely with Mr. Bloom and his team to really reimagine that hallway. Many of those rooms right now are storage rooms or being used for different kinds of things. We would need to outfit those rooms as classrooms. So there's a lot of prep work that would go into this once the decision has been made. One is scheduling, but then 2 is room assignments, moving everything around. Nothing that's insurmountable, but it's just stuff that takes time. So my ideal would be that we'd have a decision at the beginning of March so that we could move forward with scheduling, building that schedule, and then working with Mr. Bloom to get those rooms ready for next school year.
So what that means, board, is that we'll bring this back to you at the February 10th meeting, still to be determined as to whether that'll be a discussion item or an action item. We want to make sure that you have enough time to hear from the constituency, make sure that we've covered the parents, questions sufficiently. So we might ultimately bring this to at the February 24th meeting for potential final discussion and decision. But it would put us in a position to be on top of things, as Steph said, by March 1st, which for many reasons is going to put us in a pretty good position, not just with rooms and so forth, but also with our budgeting process, which also starts March 1st, as you know, as we build towards the fiscal year 21 budget.
And no pressure, but I'm going to a scheduling conference on Thursday in Lansing, so I might be thinking that it, just in case, I'll be ready. Just so you know. Just so you know.
Great job, team. Well done.
guys.
Really well done.
Okay, next on the discussion items is budget amendment presentation by the Administrative Cabinet.
Great, thank you, Corey. Board, as you know, we've been working diligently with you on the budget for the past 6 months. So tonight is somewhat of a culmination of those efforts. Leanne Eustace, our business manager, is going to run point on the presentation. And we've been working also, as you know, very closely with each member of the Administrative Cabinet. For those that are here in attendance or those that might be home watching and listening to the board meeting, the Administrative Cabinet encompasses the administrative team, the business office, and then each one of the department heads or supervisors. So there's 10 of us. And as we work together, part of what we wanted to be able to do for you, board, and I'll try to say this in a way that hopefully could be much more delineated and explained as we go through the presentation this evening. When we took a look, when I first came on board on July 18th, within 2 days, I needed to freeze the budget because there were no budgeting principles. There was no fiscal responsibility that was any type of manageable situation. And so we've had to put things in place, safeguards, as well as a budgeting process that has brought us to tonight. We have incredible news for you, great news, because part of what we found is that the budget was broke. But that was because the budget process was broke. And so we've fixed that. And part of it is, it doesn't fall to Leanne. As a superintendent in a school district this size, I serve as not only your CEO, but also your CFO, your Chief Financial Officer. And so Leanne will talk more to that, but each one of the members of the cabinet that are here this evening, one of the things, board, that we wanted to ensure is that each member of the cabinet fully understands the K-12 budget. So food service knows what's going on in Stephanie's budget. Stephanie knows what's going on in Steve's budget. Trina knows what's going on in the technology budget, and on and on. So it's one of those things that, again, the more eyes and the more talent you can put in the process, the better the decisions that are going to be made. So we did at the start of this fiscal year, as we were building our team, we did need to make some tough staffing decisions. But we were an administrative-heavy district. We had funds that were being placed in areas that were simply misappropriated and misapplied. So we've done a lot of that adjusting, much of what we have shared with you in the past, but it'll, again, be more encapsulated this evening for you. Every once in a while, we'll hear from someone in the community saying, well, John, maybe you hear something like this, is this sustainable? International travel, building projects where you're not using bond issue, but you're using, existing fund balance to be able to take care of some of these things. As a board, you have increased staffing at the same time, reducing staff where it was no longer needed. You've been able to increase wages and compensation in areas where also it was greatly needed, and held the line in areas where it needed to be. And it's put us in a position, again, to put you to give you information that we hope will cause you to feel like we are on the right path, that we've stabilized the budgeting process, and that we can move forward now with great confidence. So as we go through this process, we'd invite you to ask questions at any point. We'll sure do questions at the end of the presentation, of course, but we don't want you to have to wait. If there's something that you want addressed, please just cut right in. Leanne, again, will be the point of the spear on the presentation, but she'll be tossing the ball to different members of the cabinet. Of course, they'll come up to the microphone, and we'll take you through this. Again, this is very intentional because not only, Board, do we want you to know and understand, but surely the community, that each member of the cabinet is fully cognizant of, as Leanne and I are, of where every dollar is, why every dollar is there, and how we're going to use it. That was not the process, Board, in the past. That was not the case for whatever reason, and that's fine, but it's not a budgeting process I've ever been comfortable with, where it's just one or two people making those decisions. Rather, it's an administrative cabinet working with their respective departments and staffs, and then bringing it to you. Earlier tonight, we met with the Facilities and Finance Committee. Leanne did an outstanding job taking the committee through greater detail than might be shared with you. But for the rest of the board, please know that Leanne and I stand ready anytime you'd like to go into greater detail. I believe, Leanne, we have over 860 line items, both within revenue and expenditures, and we have fine-tooth combed every single one multiple times. Again, I promise you, Board, there is not $1 in this district that is misplaced or not where it should be from our perspective. Obviously, that's what you get to do as an oversight body here in the school district. So with that, Leanne and Bethany, I think we're ready to go.
Okay, and I'll just take you through the budget process. John and I met and went over all 862 revenue and expense accounts numerous times. And then we met with the administrative cabinet members and we reviewed their budgets with them. Several times they reviewed them with their peers, and several of them reviewed them with me as well. So they've been through their budgets many times.
And I thought, Leanne, bringing in Warren Buffett to help was just really a great play on your part.
And then we consulted with the experts.
Yeah.
And so, Bethany, you can.
What year was that, Leanne?
It was a while ago.
Yeah, right.
And so then the overview. In June, you approved a budget with a projected fund balance of $10.4 million. And as and you will see greater detail of this later on, we have reduced expenses $986 or $86,000. We've increased our revenue $3.4 million, which we were all expecting. The vast majority of that's impact aid. And then there was a post-audit change in fund balance from what I predicted of $500,000. That leaves us with those three changes of a projected fund balance this June of $15.3 million. Now that will change a little bit if you approve later on international travel or if there's something else that comes up. But so I'm hoping that we will have a balance of over $15 million at the end of the year. Bethany? And these are the staffing highlights. These are the changes we've made since July. GLFT contract was open, closed, and extended one additional year. They got another 1% this year, in addition to what they had received. Some of the reductions we did. We didn't replace a Spanish teacher. We changed how the band teacher worked, the director of administrative and educational technology. We reduced the nursing. We reduced the human resource clerk, and then we had a 0.5 IT, 0.5 parapro that left the district that we didn't replace. Some of the additions that we did, we increased our counseling 0.5 FTE. We created the artist in residence program. We've hired several parapros, and we've increased our custodians. We've given salary increases to the food service, parapros, and secretaries, and we have benefits for all employees working over 30 hours. The salary benefit proportion of the revenue, this goes to John saying it's sustainable. Right now, our revenue, not including impact aid, is $10.5 million. Our salary and benefits is 9.4. That's 89.89% of that revenue. Most districts are in the 95% range. This truly shows that this is sustainable.
Let's talk about that just for a second, Board. We spoke on this goal with you at the October Board retreat. This is no small thing that's been accomplished. When you think of all of the staffing changes, both as Leanne shared with you, both the reductions and the additions, but this is including now the insurance benefits that you now provide for all of your hourly employees, again, at that 30-hour mark or beyond. To be able to have our local revenue, along with some of our state aid that we receive, but again, not including any of our federal impact aid, to be at 90% with 10% discretionary funds available to run the district, that, thank you, Leanne, for reemphasizing that. That's what makes this budget sustainable. So the goal always will be, Board, at least as long as I'm here, is that all personnel-related costs, again, in that relation to local revenue, will be as close to 90% as we can make it. That will allow us to use the federal impact aid as a categorical to subsidize the general fund. Jace.
And as one of our goals, we have increased enrollment, right? That's a goal for us. And so do you see, when you talk about sustainable at this, because the increased enrollment would not change these numbers, but do you see room for our capacity for growth? You know, do we need to add staff? Or do you feel like we're at a staffing spot right now where we have room for growth without adding?
Yeah, great, thanks, Jason. Actually, what we're taking a look at is the potential for at least one additional high school teacher next year, especially to accommodate some of that advanced placement catalog enhancement that we're looking at. Also, depending on what target goals that you'll set as a Board of Education next year for each grade level, potentially, Jason, we could see an additional kindergarten section or first grade section. So as we start looking at our next budget, again, we'll start literally on March 1st, then we start factoring that into our budget projections. And Leanne, when we take a look at the taxable value increasing, Jason, right now, at least what we'll project, we'll be a lot wiser in May when we get those numbers from the county. Right now, it's projecting that the increase we'll receive in tax revenue locally will cover the increase of any wages, potential teacher hirings or additions. We'll be a lot wiser here in a few months, but that'll be the hope, so we can maintain that 90%.
And I think teachers, that's great. You know, if we need to add teachers because we have kids, that's a wonderful thing. And it sounds to me you're not talking about administrative costs, which is I think it sounds to me like you feel like we have capacity in terms of the non-teaching staff to handle more load.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jace.
Okay. And then the changes to revenue. The 3.4 million I talked about earlier, 3.284 of that was impact aid. Local revenue was 737. Federal was 96,000, and then all others, and this was primarily an ISD transfer, equals that 3.4 million. And now this is the expenses. This is where we reduced by 986,000, and Bethany can hand out later on the detail that will show you the salary and benefits of all that. But this is, we've cut instruction, 258,000. Support services, 365. I'm just doing the highlights. Operation and maintenance is 143. Each of the budget managers or administrative cabinet will go into some of that in their talks. But this is how it worked out that we were able to lower the budget $986,000 while increasing staff and the benefits for everyone.
So again, Board, and for those in the audience, anything that you see in parentheses, that's good for us.
Thank you.
Yes. That means that there's been a reduction within that area that puts that $986,000 back into the budget. And any money that is not being used in operations is being used for children and being used for staff that directly affect our children.
And you can see in instruction, that's the result of the music, the band teacher and the Spanish teacher. And there are a few other things in there. The support services was the reduction of the school nurse and our director of technology and administrative instruction. So you can see some of those and we'll go into a little bit more detail on that. Bethany? Okay, elementary. All of the directors have their highlights on what their budget includes or doesn't include.
Glasses for this one. So, yes, we're not going to go through all 362. I'll just give you 7 highlights for elementary. So first of all, we did have teacher accounts that each year was a lot of $300 to spend money off it. But instead, what we're doing is we are adopting all of the teacher accounts into one general education that will allow more oversight and conversations and what is needed. I also, teachers are spending a lot of their own budget on things like paper and pencils and stuff. One of the things that I from the office is so they can instead focus on like outcomes or science or I know our young eyes spend a lot of science so that's what we're going to spend that money. We also see new curriculums we're implementing the prior year driving our textbook budget again. So our textbook budget before was $134,000, and we were able to bring that down to $800. So that was a big change this year.
So that's part of that process, thank you, Trina, where money was placed into a line item without any aforethought. This isn't a Leanne issue. She was simply responding to, there was little to no administrative oversight or input. And so when you have $134,000 in a line item, when you need less than $1,000, clearly, again, that's just a misplacement of those funds that allows us to reduce expenditures as it's budgeted so that there doesn't have to be a reduction in staff to try to get to a point where ideally will be less than $1 million eventually within the next 2 fiscal years is the goal of fiscal aid going towards subsidizing the general fund.
Yeah, and that's true. The 134 was what was spent last year, so I rolled it this year, not knowing if it was a one-time expenditure, and I didn't have that guidance. So this meeting with the principals and that, it was been very beneficial.
So the third bullet, special teachers budget. So we aren't going to art and PE separate because they have a lot of. So for example, we have lost and has $4,000 in the budget, but they use up the paper, they use up the paper, they use up the clay. So that would allow us to project that as an account. New budget line to cover snacks. This is something really positive that we were able to do for our young guys and kids this year. And we were able to get $4,000 into our budget going back to kids that are not families providing snacks for everyone. Reduction of general education dues and fees. $700 was placed in this line item to fees, but they spent it on a savings club membership, and that was it. And so we were able to save over $600 in that category. Let's see. Identified school improvement accounts to support staff and parent program and additional training and certification. So what were we were able to do here? Let's see, that number, it wasn't, didn't change a whole lot, but instead the oversight of it did change a bit. We were able to offer more, say, for paraprofessionals this year, CPR training, PBIT. CPI.
And they received the books too, that your book club.
Yep, exactly. They were part of, I talked to you earlier in the year about our active school discipline, professional learning. All of our peers are doing that, so we were able to include them in school. And then the last item that I have up here is decreasing our furniture budget. So again, it was rolled over $20,000 in the past, and we didn't have anything in mind for this year. So we were able to bring that down to $2,000. they
So like, the elementary school, we also provide our line items for the teacher, so that we are having our teachers do just their general sticky notes. Everyone was allocated $300, so they were all buying exactly the same thing. And in some of those rooms you walked into, and there was enough supplies there to last the month. So our goal is, let's buy what we need and have teachers come and get what we need. We'll supply that out of the main office, and then our goal is that in March, each of our departments will meet and project a department budget. So for example, our quality team from middle school all the way to high school, they buy composition books for their students and writing notebooks. So we will purchase those notebooks in bulk and distribute those and just and save some money. And then I think the most important part about it from my perspective is it affords our departments time to collaborate and talk about their curriculum specifically. What do we want to do at each grade level? What supplies and materials do we need to do that? And then they, like, my hope is that when they talk, they'll have a better sense of how the line is. Because, oh, I'm going to buy these materials. We'll do this dissection in the 7th grade. You do that one in 8th grade. You do that one in 12th grade. And then the idea is ideally it should be in line with those departments. This second item is huge for us because we added the advisory. We added budgets for the advisory. So now we have the middle school advisory budget separate from the high school advisory budget. And the nice thing about this for me is, number one, we didn't have advisory at all, but it also forced us to look at what other things were we budgeting that were combined middle school and high school. And so Leanne's been great about breaking those things apart. So now we can get a better sense for what are we spending in middle school versus what are we spending in high school, and what are we spending those things on. Because before it was just lumped into one secondary. I didn't have a sense for what it cost. So this has been really helpful. We actually did purchase a curriculum to support the state standards, the CASA standards. So we went through a review process and we purchased adaptations for our advisory students and we had several to draw. So that's been super helpful. We also broke our music budget into subcategories. One of the things that we realized in our band area specifically was nothing had been inventoried in a very long time. So with our two artists in residence, at Robot and Humphrey, they took probably the first 3 weeks that they were here with us, and they went through every single solitary store we have. They cataloged all of our instruments. They identified which instruments needed repair, which instruments were not salvageable. You see that really cool like hobby. They instruments. But then they also identified what did we need to purchase if we were going to support, and we projected a $30 million margin. So we now can see what are we spending on repairs, what are we spending on purchase, what are we spending on music, what are we spending on design materials. So that has been really helpful for us as well, so that we can do a better job next year in that case. The other part about this music category is that Mark has been working with Ashley Larimer and our musical director to project what does it really cost to put on a production like Little Shop of Horrors. What does it cost to put on a production in the spring, which will be a play? And let's start projecting what those budgets need to look like so that we can get a sense for what number one, what are we spending, and number two, what do we need to spend, so we can get a better grip on all those things. So we did add that instrumental music. We have the artist in residence honorarium. So Pat and Illinois have been bringing in experts, different instruments to work with our students. And we give them, I think it's a $200 honorarium.
I'm not sure how much
I
that
can't
is.
remember the exact amount. We have a line item built in there for when we bring in these guest artists. Each department will submit budgets in March. Again, I already mentioned that. We also increased our line items for the media center. There had been one line item called media center, and now we have it broken down into what are we spending on books to supplement our library? What are we spending on periodicals? What are we spending on databases? What are we spending on materials? So our media specialists are also breaking it apart in elementary, middle school, high school, so we can get a better sense for what do we need and what are we spending. We've also reduced our mission virtual and ingenuity budgets shelves and shelves of college-level textbooks that are out of date within 2 years. Because the university's asked us to provide the most recent edition. So we changed our policy that we are asking for students to rent their textbooks, submit the rental cost to us, and we'll reimburse them, but hopefully to reduce the library that we have of obsolete books that we use. And then the last thing is, which is another big curriculum issue for me, we're hoping that we will be reducing our middle school testing budget. We were able to notice that, for example, our 8th grade students take 6 standardized and test assessments a year. They're taking the NWEA 3 times a year, ESAT twice a year, and then they're participating in my staff or the Michigan MSF tests. And that was just too much. We're not using all that data. So we're going to eliminate NWEA for 8th grade, and they'll have the ESAT right in line with the 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. And then also the
Thanks, Stephanie.
Just before reviewing the athletic department, we started the school year, we had an aspiration by coming up with a zero-based budget. Essentially, that we reached out to our coaches and developed our budget based on what we need, what the things we need to have in the this year. By the expensive that we need to. We submitted that budget to her and we did request this budget. One of the big things that, big decisions that we made with the rebranding process in the spring and summer was to commit to our teams who, you already have very generous uniform teachers. In fall, we started this contract and rebranding process. We made the decision as a team that it was super important that all of our teams, not only on that field or surface uniform, but to provide any teams that need some travel suits, to get off that bus, to show up to school, looking like they have some providing that first class, person. So we thank you for that, and that was a cost associated with that. In my opinion, when we got Rachel Ransom, we got an average of 73% of students participating at least one sport. To me, that's probably better than any advertising or promo dollars.
Absolutely.
See it like I see it, but I can see it in the hallways. Some teams still get personalized items. Those are all family dollars, all fundraised dollars. We're talking about team things that are issued. Postseason travel. What a great budget line item we have. Really truthfully, when we got for the first time, all of our MHS tournaments all through spring. We sent our boys and girls cross country teams to the state finals for the first time in 19 years that we did. And successful run with the football team we have. We were to Calumet, to Claire, and Detroit. Really add up to China. Surely we'll grow again. We've got some needs this year where we needed additional equipment, mostly in terms of safety, mainly and specifically some, we don't have shoulder pads that our coaches, Jerry specifically feel is the right fit for a student. If he doesn't feel safe, or any sport or coach for that matter, we expect him to help it appropriately and safely. We had to order extra helmets because we had signed big we had neck injuries where we feel it very important to purchase a helmet that would provide them an extra level of safety. So some of those equipment needs that we just don't see, and we may not have budgeted for, occur along the way. So we will have to ensure that we protect them. Along with equipment, I would say let's suggest that some field equipment, some things that need to be paid for facilities or events. Mainly, I would say is paid for 10 goals, park, show that sessions or of technology, has been second to none. We continue to use and purchase as needed impact concussion baseline testing. That is the standard, the norm, to baseline test all of our student athletes to keep them on track to high school graduation, to monitor their head activity, to any sort of pattern recognition testing. Huddle team video breakdown and the software messaging to students and families that a member of our teams use. Not all of them, only because Huddle only provides the technology for various sports. They had an increase, a significant increase in the cost of it this year. That I battled for a couple of months to the point where we shut Jerry off to start the football season. They're only, they're a one-stop shop, the only game in town. Ultimately, we wanted our teams to have that capability, which we do. Fix a lot is the automated live stream cameras that we've talked about frequently that we've invested in for student events, Schedule Star and Big Teams is our scheduling software that we use that combines right into real-time data in our website. We have nice functions on our website. That is a huge asset for our software as far as Rachel and I sat for presentations so we had to say game changer, which is another form of technology. It's a game changer for our families. Collect registration forms and data, which is have the ability to send single blast communication to students, parents, team members, or parents, or both. Emergency medical information at our coaches, at veteran, and trainers' fingertips could be a game changer. Let's do more on that. So that's it. That's the overview.
Okay, general administration and business services, those are two functions. One is the superintendent's office, which would be John and Bethany, and the other one, business services, would be me and Sue doing payroll. The budgets haven't changed. My budget didn't change much. It was just a reduction of $2,100. Superintendents changed our legals. We reduced that budget by $54,000 over last year, and we decreased the benefits by 59 because John's a bargain. He doesn't take health insurance, and we don't have to pay into the retirement system for him. So.
Happy to help.
The next one, Bethany. Okay, transportation. In operations, you're on deck.
Minor changes. We purchased a couple school buses this year. Budget for cameras. We have 2 installed on the outside that have kept
Just a quick question. When do we have to buy another bus? When do we have to buy another bus at this point? When? Yeah.
next year. Hopefully get by this year without them. A lot of that depends on April. That's when we have the state inspection. How fun that is. What I see under the buses, we have to right now.
Thank you.
I can, I have it right here.
This was a interesting process. Will, she knows so much about everything. assuming that knows a lot about something you want to get involved. It's always fun to go see the issues, everything like that. Learn so much. Because we're not all budget mavens like she is, but I learned so much. This doesn't show it in numbers that we all probably kind of know. We all have our numbers. But it's so cool to go in and see her about this. So basically, what I've done in my department, we increased full-time maintenance and also so basically, we brought Dave Balfour on for half-time maintenance, half-time plus garage, because there's a lot going on down there. So it's a great addition. And then the one FTE daytime construction was Sam, who moved from nights to days. So here, we all have been here in the hallways, here in the hall, go up and down. Having Sam is the guy that, we're all so with that, it's not smoke and mirrors. And I didn't know coming here, what's sinking fund man? Does everyone know what a sinking fund is, right? Yeah, nobody knows it. What's a sinking fund, man?
Bethany.
Tell us.
Okay, the sinking fund was,
Thank you, Vanna.
we voted this in the early 2000s, and when I got here, I literally called our attorneys and said, don't we have to spend this? And they didn't, it was so old, they had archived it, and they didn't even know when we voted it in. They had to get it out of the archives, and they said, no, you don't have to, it can sit there. Well, then John came and he says, why aren't we spending this? So
With that, I didn't know it's a sinking fund. And gave me a great example. And I said to John, is this in my sinking fund? John knows this like a book. You go through line after line after line. What is eligible for sinking? What it is, it doesn't come out of you. Right? It comes out of sinking fund. We all know it's there, so why not spend it? It's like one bank. We got it there. We might as well use it. So Leanne gave me a great analogy. Keep it going. Whatever doesn't fall on the floor. Blinds. I found out $1,500 on my budget because that's what they come off. So things like fixtures that are mounted, sinking funds, carpet, auditory lighting and sound. That's
part of it.
part of it.
Yep.
So, right. The stuff that moves around is not.
Right.
Flooring in the elementary library. All in the library, we've got new carpet, new stuff in there. We've done a little holiday. Track and field, again, sinking fund. Everybody's able to see all the sidewalks. Oh my gosh, those sidewalks got pulled up on the cost because they're rubber. Some good problem. Get them up. So we have them done in metals. They won't tear up. Dojo remodel, all the ceiling clay, additional
Shot sensors.
shot sensors, again, fixture, sinking funds. And then the current ups, the elementary library, and the food classroom will all be done. A lot of that savings is because of genius of these two people coming together and making it right.
Nope. They don't want to hear about vomit anymore.
But I do too.
I'm here to talk about the technology of it. This was a big, first of all, what you guys we have is when I got here, I kind of noticed that basically, if you pushed a button in the process, it fell asleep. So there was a lot of routine that we basically, last year, we just had to have too much. This year, we were able to consolidate that all down to one budget.
You did great. No? Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you. Okay, and this is just a repeat of the slide earlier, just to review that, you know, our projected fund balance of June was 10 million. We've reduced our expenses, increased our revenue, the change in the post-audit fund balance, that we are projecting that our fund balance will be 15.3 in June. And then and what are we gonna do with that? What are we gonna do with the money? And these are some of the pending projects that we have: a new bus garage, an elementary playground, the teen room out of the fields, and then tennis courts. And John has been working, and Steve, with architects and all of that, trying to get all of those projects up and running. And so, are there any questions?
When you use sinking fund money, like in Steve's, references, where does that show up in terms of, does the sinking fund money show up as revenue?
The revenue was collected back in the early 2000s. That money had just been sitting in a bank account.
Okay, so then my question is, when we're talking about sustainability, we've used up, if I read it right, something like 390 of 700 and something. So in thinking, in another year, that sinking fund could be gone.
I mean, potentially, Jenna, it depends on how many large projects still remain that would fit underneath the criteria for sinking
Okay.
fund. And without question, at least at some point in the future, in the years to come, considering another sinking fund millage discussion with the community would be in hand.
Okay.
So for instance, the law allows a sinking fund to be up to 5 mils for 5 years. Because of our taxable value base being so strong here in Glen Lake, we have almost $1 billion in taxable value. So if you even had $500,000 for 3 years, that would bring in $1.5 million. That would then go towards roofs, boilers. We could then purchase buses through the sinking fund, so that saves, again, anything a sinking fund expenditure is used on saves the general fund, which allows you to use that, again, for your personnel, your instructional services, your students. So all things to be considered down the line. But the good thing, too, is because we hit the major items with this year's cycle of using the sinking fund, that this might last us another 2 fiscal years, Jenna.
Okay, and is that the only place where there's sort of a discrepancy between what, you're taking money out of a fund that isn't really listed as revenue or expenditure?
It will be. We adopted a budget that showed a fund balance of 700,000, and you will adopt it again in June. There was a budget adopted. There are expenses and revenue.
And our auditors track all of that and provide that for you in our audit documents.
Okay, I was just curious.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Great job, everybody. Great job.
Good job, team. The next discussion item is 6.3, senior class trip.
Board of Education, this is here simply if you have any additional questions or comments, things that I can be working on for you. Can share with you that we presently have 36 seniors that if indeed this is a trip that you approve, would love to be able to go on. We are scheduled to have Mrs. Long, Mr. Mattson, and myself be the 3 staff members attending this trip. It is possible, if we have slots available, that parents could potentially come. They would have to pay for the trip, 100 cents on the dollar on their own. That's been communicated to them. But other than that, Board, we provided for you the most updated itinerary, takes you through on a daily basis and gives you the key highlights.
John, quick question. Is that ratio okay? If you've got 36 and 3 people, is to 1, 12 to 1?
For that age group, yeah, very appropriate, Rick. Thanks. That's a great question. If they were younger students, we'd be looking more at 10 to 1 when we go out on those types of adventures, yeah. Understood.
I have a question. When do we really need to button this down? What our decision is with how we're going to completely finance it if we do it? I mean, we're getting close to February now. I know. What is the time? What would be appropriate for these families to?
Great, thank you. As I shared with you in my board notes and comments that accompanied your packet, if this is something you'd consider tonight, unless you had other things you wanted me to be working on for you, in a ideal sense, this would have been approved in August. Obviously, we did not have an ideal situation this year. So we've been working on this, as you know, right along. The proposal that I've asked you to consider is that for this senior class, that, except for a few meals that they would purchase, their own passports, the cost of this trip would be covered through the budget that you've seen presented to you this evening.
Discussion on that? Would we,
So John, do you need a set amount of money or up to a certain amount of money in order to be able to go ahead and cement this?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Right now, the way we're looking at the trip costs with the airfare and all, we're looking that it could come in if we had 41 students and the 3 adults. So we've budgeted that at 44. Again, presently we're at 36 plus the 3 adults. So we have budgeted $152,000 for that international trip experience. It could be higher than that. If it came in at the 36 students and the 3 adults, it'd be less than the 152. That would be with a full complement of 44. If we had more seniors that were able to go, then we would take a look at the possibility of that amount increasing. But based on what the students have shared with us, it looks like staying around that 40, 41 number max will be what we'll land at. Yeah.
So do we need to approve up to a certain amount of money with it in mind that if you needed more, you'd come back and talk to us?
I think that's a fair way to go about that, Rick. Absolutely.
get addition, students?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my thoughts on it is we have a pretty hefty fund balance of $15 million that I feel like we need to really invest in our students. That's what it's there for.
Beyond any enjoyment that would come from the students, folks being able to share with the region that part of what occurs when you're a graduate at Glen Lake is that you have the opportunity to qualify and participate in an international experience that is really spectacular. I think it's a great thing for our students. I think it puts them on a pretty nice track for the next chapter in their life. Obviously, I'm pretty biased about this. I've been blessed to do a lot of international travel with my own family and with students from other school districts I've worked in, and the power and impact it has on young people's lives it's really hard to quantify. The qualitative nature of it is self-evident in their lives and what they do when they come back and the changes that it makes in them.
We probably need to move on this. The passport, people getting their passports alone and the amount of time that's left to do this, to communicate and then have that go through. I think we're really at a point where in order to be fair to the families, if this is something they're going to plan to do, we need to make some action on this. Not this meeting, then very quickly, just to be responsible.
Chrissy Hendershot has been, Jace, thank you. Chrissy Hendershot has been working with parents regarding the passport process. So we're at least a little ahead of the curve there in case. So at least they do have the information.
Yeah, it's always the ones that aren't, that will be the ones that are the
invariably
the very end, right?
That's and it is a 6 to 8 week start to finish period. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we approve a senior class trip for up to $160,000 for this year. And, then we can get into discussion after we have a second.
Discussion?
I remember passing it along. I'd have to get back to it to cite it. Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you. I thought you were asking for like the actual citation. I do remember the gist of it. But,
Put me on the spot.
but yeah, I mean, it talks about the importance of travel, big and small. So, so for all ages, and whether it's just getting out in your own neighborhood, like to the beach or to American Waste, or whether it's going to Europe or to Washington, D.C. And certainly that idea of like the great equalizer that you're talking about, just doesn't matter the income, it doesn't matter, it's the opportunity for everybody. I mean, I think that's a huge part of it, so that you're, and what a lucky thing for our students to be able to have that experience and to start their lives with that kind of social capital in their back pocket.
Thank you both. Thank you, Rick.
Students are worth this investment. Well, can I have, I guess that would go under, if we make this into an action item. Oh, and we got a second? Oh, and we did discussion. Okay. All right. Next, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you so much.
I'm really excited for our kids.
Just amazing. Thank you so much.
I think to add to that, Stephanie, you're working on something for, what we're doing for every class, every year? That'd be great, yeah. Oh, you're going to have it next week? Is that what you're going to do?
Wasn't that on the agenda for next time?
It's on the agenda for February 10th, but we can sure give you a preview tonight if you would like. Rick, would you like a preview? We can sure.
I can wait. I've been scolded.
All right. Well, anything else with the senior trip? No? Okay, on to action items. Additional action items. So I am on to action item 2020, approval of the amended 2019-2020 budget. Can I have a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the amended budget for 2019 to 2020.
Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. On to action item 2120, approval of English 12 overnight trip to Grand Rapids. Can I have a motion? Second. Any discussion?
The really cool travel opportunities available to our students.
I'd really like to actually hop on this bus and go down with you. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. We are on to public comment. Is there any public comment? Yeah?
These meetings, the administration, I learned so much. And the discourse that happens with these meetings, it's just really nice to be here. I want to thank John for seeing the things in my room that I understand now are sinking funds that could be replaced, and the support for life skills and the health initiatives. I think I was still working under this old thought process that maybe these things are just going to go away, life skills, if I leave or whatever. And I just feel every time, no, these are very important and these are valued. And I just really appreciate what is happening, how everything is so, everybody's ahead of it. And it just feels so comforting is the best word, that we're ahead of the curriculum, we're ahead of the budget, we're ahead, where it feels for so many years that we weren't there. And so it just is just very comforting to be in that position, and I thank everyone for that. See, a little speech.
Any other public comment? No? Okay, we're on to Superintendent's Report.
I'm going to turn time over to Mark Mattson for an announcement regarding a resignation that will come before you more formally on February 10th. Mark, did you want to cover the events that occurred at 3:20 this afternoon?
Sure. Thank you. I was just thinking of this a moment ago. 3:20 was harder on me, I think, than it was on the guy that made the announcement or the kids. But unfortunately for Glen Lake, Jerry Andrews has tendered that he is stepping down as the varsity football head coach. And I say I hope stepping down and not retiring and not resigning, stepping down, hopefully to what might be a lower level, something that may just still benefit our school and our student athletes in that football program, but benefit him as a family man, as he's missing too much time with Kathy and Megan and Duke's football at Saginaw Valley State. He wrestled with it for 2 months, and and I've been wondering how many years can he do this, because I know that Duke and his football experience is weighing heavily on his mind, and he has wrestled with it for 2 months since the playoff run. He got a text message when we were in Calumet indicating that Duke had caught his first collegiate reception for, I think, 36 yards, the longest reception by a tight end in Saginaw Valley State and since 1992 or something like that, right? So they had it nailed down, and that affected Jerry significantly because he wasn't there to see it. And then we got to Ford Field, and he told me that he felt walking off that turf that family was calling. So we can be selfish and disappointed and, be sad that Jerry's going to step away, at least from the leadership position, of which I think he does an admirable job in terms of program management and molding and shaping young students. We've certainly got to support that decision and admire him for putting what is most important, and that is his family and his upcoming memories with them. So we had it timed out that he would meet with the program today at 3:20. Pure silence in there. I think numbness and shock described it best. And we rolled the information. He sent an email to the parents, and I had sent an email to the media and to the staff of coaches and our Glen Lake school staff to inform. So I believe I hit send at 3:35, actually, by the time I left the students after I was done with my piece, and it had to be by 3:40 it hit the Twitter wire. So we're always very cautious about these timelines to make sure that those who need to know first and foremost are informed, but yet get it out to the masses in a very timely fashion from there. So with that said, we will begin the search for a new varsity head football coach. And as John and I have discussed, and as I rolled out to the young people in the room today, we'll be very intentional about our process and how we get the next person in place. And I told the guys what might feel like it's dragging to you, if it becomes March or April, they need to remember, yes, we're getting excited for summer activities that are right around the corner, and camps and 7-on-7s and strength and conditioning. But they've got to understand that our process will be intentional. Perhaps that person's walking our halls. Perhaps the person's in our community. Perhaps the person, when we post the position, is a diamond that we find, but they deserve the best that we can put in place for them. And that process could be short-term, and it could be longer than they might think, but it will not be off the radar. And I always seem like I have to remind parents and students of that, because it is intentional to make sure that we're getting the best person in place that we can. So we will run that process. And like we shared with everybody today, thankfully Jerry doesn't leave his teaching job. He doesn't leave the strength and conditioning. He's looking to maybe coach at a different level. He's not leaving track and field. He's not leaving labs. He's not leaving all of the great things that he does here. He's just stepping aside from that position. We've still got him here to mentor our students and be a leader in our school.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Board correspondence was a thank you note from the board to John Fields, senior class, Sue Pierce, students of Sue's, and administrative cabinet for the recognition of our board work. Thank you, everybody. Scheduled activities, February 10th, regular board meeting. February 11th will be our first at 6 p.m. will be a community forum in the high school media center. February 17th will be no school, President's Day. The February 24th workshop meeting, again at 6 p.m.
So
And
the February 11th community
that will be our
forum,
first community forum.
and can board members, attend, since we'll have,
Yes.
but don't
The best
sit
way-
by,
the
but
best
don't
way-
sit by each other.
Participate.
Well, the other, and the way to safeguard that, Rick, is we can call that a special board meeting, so that if a quorum shows up, then you can be there, you can participate. There will be no agenda, there will be no call to order by the Board of Education, simply for purpose of participating in an informational meeting.
Yeah, my purpose wouldn't be there to speak. I would be just there to listen.
Do you think, for instance, how many of you are thinking you would like to at least be at that meeting? So Jason would be facilitating. Okay, great. You do not need to make a decision on a special board meeting until February 10th. We just have to do it within an 18-hour window. We'll be fine doing it on the 10th.
Is there, who would show interest in coming to that? Would it
Looks
be
like
more
at
than
least 5 or 6. Yeah.
Then, yeah. We don't need to do that right now, or would it be beneficial?
You sure can, board, whatever you'd like.
Want to turn that into a special meeting for February 11th? I have a motion. Second. Any discussion?
I think it's a good way to kick it off. I think it carries a little more of the weight of it, just to get it started, at least. Yeah.
Well, I agree. That's okay.
It is okay.
Lisa's not with us tonight. Hey, Lisa, if you're tuned in, I'm sure she is. And she'll be in. Hello. Yeah, totally. Okay, well, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Great, that'll be resolution 2320 for you, board.
Okay, on that note, I'm passing over the mic to Jason for our study session.
Okay, great. I know it's 8 o'clock, and, I don't want to, but at any rate, this should be a pretty fast process. And once again, the idea of going through this is to just make sure we're on track. We have, thanks. We've laid out 4, particular goals in our one-year plan that we wanted to move forward, our rocks for the year. Those are the things that were the 4 most important things that as a board, when we came together in the fall, that we felt, we really wanted to accomplish in this first year in order to meet our 3-year picture. So, again, up on the right, there's our key metrics. And so what I really just want to do in this first practice is just to very quickly review these. And the idea is just to have a couple of minutes of just review of where we're at and if we're on track or off track. If we're off track, there's a reason why we're off track, and most of the time it's the communication or just we haven't talked about it in a while. So the way that I'd like this to work is if you were a contributor to this day, up here, which a number of us in the room work, if you feel as though when I read the rock that you're in the dark or that you feel like we're off track or we haven't heard something, it's the moment for us to say, I think that one might be off track. If I don't hear any response, then we're on track and we're just going to move past it. I'll collect the off tracks. I'll make a little list of the ones that we're off track on, and I think Bethany and I will continue to work this. You got your little on track, off track deal? We could actually color these on green or red if we wanted as we go. And again, it's what we would do at that point is we would find the ones that were off track, and we would just prioritize those as we kind of, whoever felt they were the loudest for tonight would say, hey, I really want to find out about this. What's going to happen as we do this is we'll find, you know, the who owns these rocks is really the question that I think we get to. And, you know, tonight and maybe going forward, tonight it's John, but going forward it may be cabinet members or someone on the board team. We may find that, you know, one of us is more responsible for one of these than something else. So without further ado, me yapping, we're just going to go through this. This may only take us 3 or 4 minutes, and then we're going to adjourn. So be careful. We're not going to waste time on this. So, you know, goals for the year, just want to run through where we were at. We had an operating budget that we went through. We had estimated that at 10.8 million. This is just for sake of remembering where we were at as part of this process, where we were at in October. Our total enrollment, 750 was what we were looking at having. I don't know if we're still there or not, but I'm going to assume we're still, you know, in that space. We're doing good. So our first goal for the year, development of a comprehensive facility improvement plan. Again, are we on track or off track? Yeah. Does anyone anyone feel ownership to this, that make any comments on this? Or if not, we can go right ahead to the next one. You know, we have plans up ahead. We've got stuff coming here in the next couple of weeks. It feels to me on track. I'm just going to talk through that. Great, lots of head nods. That's what we're looking for. On track. All right. Comprehensive budget proposed and understood by all. Sometimes this happens where you get in the meeting and someone snuck something in and we find that we're on track all of a sudden.
Totally. 2 weeks ago, no. Today, definitely.
I'm really good. You know, again, these are our yearly goals. If we made an impact so far, and I'd say tonight was, congratulations, you guys, a really nice step, and thank you for all the contribution. On track? On track. Fantastic. Basic live streaming of board meetings. There's a different word for this one, and that's done.
Done.
All right. A 1-year goal done. Congratulations. We're really doing well. Curriculum review on February 24th, 2020. On track or off track? On track? How about the date? Are we good on the date, do you think? Or is this something that we would, you know, is there an issue with the date? Again, you know, we were really specific on that date, so you feel like we're there?
I don't remember why we're.
That's fantastic. And in this process, we did exactly what we would hope, is that someone's like, I own this. You know, I feel really good about being the person to say, I'm going to get us there. So thank you. And that's awesome, because I think what that does is it says, even though I may not know it, you feel like we're on track and you know it better than I do, right? Does anyone need any clarifying questions on this rock?
Did you have a question, Corey, as to why the 24th?
Why did we pick February 24th?
March 1st, folks. It goes back to that starting of the budget process. So if we know where we're headed with our curriculum, it helps us budget materials, again, staffing needs, that type of thing.
Okay, makes sense.
Good? Excellent. I'm going to swing over because I do think we want to review these, which are key metrics, okay? At this point, and this is something that I think that we should discuss, we typically in this area, we would also go through our key metrics, so like expenses to plan, enrollment changes, and academic achievement. These were all things that we felt like these were going to, if we were separated and we just needed to know a number, how we're doing, these would help us with these numbers would help us understand how the district's doing. And these were 3 that we named. Again, we can change these over time as well. But I would ask, are we on track at some point to have a metric related to expenditures to plan? On track, off track? Sounds to me.
I'd like to see us at some point end up with a monthly budget, you know, or, you know, expenses to budget, you know, which means the budgeting process has to change from annual to monthly.
Okay.
You know, where we spend a lot of money in the fall on certain things, and then, you know, payroll is pretty consistent during the year, but, you know, basically, so every month we could look at something and say, yep, you know, we're on target, we're on target. Oh, let's talk about this one.
Okay.
That's what I'd like to see.
Rick, would you be comfortable with percentages, for instance, so that in, let's say, November, there might be some instructional line items where we're 75% of budget completed, because a lot of those are going to be our upfront costs, versus utility bills, heating bills, those types of things where you could see those, that we get to this point of the year, are we around 50% as we're heading into the rest of the major heating season, or are you wanting, obviously it could be real dollars with that, but would percentages help you? What would be best?
Well, if you did real dollars, then the percentages would be easy, from there. So both would be fine if the system will generate something like that. Okay. But it does mean your process changes because you have to. Okay. But it means you have to budget by month then, rather than annual.
I've never budgeted by month. I'd be very uncomfortable with that.
Okay.
Only because, Rick, I'm not familiar with it at all.
Okay.
I know how to budget as you've seen tonight, so that we know that within, whether, depending on the area, whether it's a 12-month cycle or the 9-month cycle, and knowing that we are within that budget category, the amount that's been set. Again, for me, that's all I've known. But what we can give you is a monthly update as to how that fits, so that if, let's say it was in an instructional area and we have a 9-month budget cycle for that, then we can show real dollars and percentages for that time on a monthly basis, Leanne, and at least point in that direction for Rick.
Okay. That'd be great. Yep.
That might allow us to adjust things more, maybe on a month-by-month basis, but still having the yearly budget total that we'd be looking at. Okay, great, thanks.
So, just to, so did you have a comment too?
The question about what, I would have thought that we got the expenditures to the plan tonight. So I'm asking, was it a sustainability plan that we had mentioned in a 3-year kind of goal sequence? What is the plan reference?
Yeah, from what I recall is we would have a planned budget, and through the course of the year, if we were, in terms of the budget being a predictor of what we would spend, were we on or off that plan or going through the course of the year, so that if something came up that was a huge expense that we had unplanned or something like that that threw us off, we would be aware of it, and there would be that level of understanding. Now, how detailed we want to be and how we look forward is, I think, we'll get smarter at. But
Well, if I were answering that, then I would feel like we're very on track, because this is a pretty comprehensive look at where the departments think they're going to be and what they're going to be spending. And if there was a sudden breakdown in, something that we needed to address, I think we'd know how it impacted our remaining budget, and I don't know.
yeah, so I think what'll happen is if we can define, and so what's great in a process like this is that Rick, Leanne, you guys had essentially a conversation about what the very next step would be, right? And that's all we're really trying to do, is find the very next step. So you guys have said, okay, I can produce a report. Rick's like, that sounds great. Let's take a look at it. You don't need to explain the report tonight. Let's have a chance to take a look at it. And what would be the timing that you feel like the first version of that report would come would be something I would ask, like how soon, is this something you guys would check in independently, or the next finance committee, we would have this together, because then we would further define if we can have a metric from it. So you're like, okay, we've seen this. I think that this is the number that we really want to watch, so that we could say, this is the key metric, expenditure to plan means this percentage number is where we need to be at this time. Are we on track or off track? Yes, we're on track. And then that's really how we report this down the road. The issue that came up is we've not agreed to how we're going to do this. You guys are on first step, right? So you're to do, and it sounds like Leanne's to do, by some point, which is up to you. Great. before the next board meeting. So what's the date on that one?
February 10th.
So February 10th, by February 10th, you and Rick will have met, and hopefully that'll set us on track, right?
Well, actually, we'll meet at like 5 o'clock, and it will be the Finance Committee meeting before that meeting to review, the monthly budget.
Awesome.
The budget to date, let's say.
So all we've done here, we've taken a step forward on something that we weren't forward on before we got here. That's what we're looking for.
You know, one metric that seems like it came out of the discussion tonight is that 90% of of having the salary, the personnel costs at 90% of the state and local budget. So that's perhaps a key metric.
Yep, very strong. Excellent. You guys good? We've got something we move forward on. Move good? Good? Awesome. Great. Enrollment changes. So that was one that we talked about. Are we on track for our goals? Have we defined that? Do we need to do more work to define the enrollment pieces? Are we good for now? I guess I'd ask that of the group.
Probably better definement, board, regarding what you'd like to see your target goals per grade level for the next school year. We see at the 825 within that 3-year period of time. And so it's just, we went from 657 when you set the target goals to 709. And so we just need to see how you want to move from 709 to that 825 over the next 3 years.
Yeah. And so to me, I mean, I guess this is a question of how we would even want to make that decision. Is that good for the board to decide? Is it an administrative and teachers plan? I guess
I think it's administrative more so in terms of leveling out class sizes, evening things out. That's how I would see it.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I know that's how we approached it. Again, we had limited time this past August, but that would be the same approach, Rick, exactly. So that we're monitoring space, funding for additional sections, which of course means additional staff, and we would not be ready to bring that to you more formally until we get closer to June 1st, as we go through, again, that last quarter process that we've discussed a little bit tonight.
So in this case, we can either say we table this until, I don't know how much time you'd want, if your staff would want a month in terms of board meetings, that we would put this on the May agenda to re-talk about what next year's hopeful projection would be. Is that a suggestion?
I think that's really fair. And then, board, that allows us, depending on what that target goal ends up looking like, then also determining the open enrollment window for the school of choice applications.
Okay.
That puts us in a great spot.
Okay, so our to-do, and Bethany, this is actually more yours to add this to the first board meeting in May as a discussion item, is what we're really talking about trying to.
Great.
Sound good?
I think that key note was put on there because we had not opened up the school of choice yet, had we, in August? Have we done that yet?
Well, this was probably more a discussion in October, so yes, we had done that. That's correct. And so the main thing is, how far did we want to grow, right? How much did we want to grow before we started to close things down again?
Good?
Yeah.
Awesome. And then finally, on the key metric, the academic achievement, I don't know if we have any way to talk about this or create a next step for talking about how we would have a metric for academic achievement.
Can I mention something? I think I may have been a person who wanted that metric, and what I really would like to see this year, because it's such a year of change and transition. I've heard that there have been studies of gap analysis and that sort of thing. So I guess I'd like to know a little bit more specifically the kinds of actions that are being taken care of to overall raise academic achievement. I'm not as interested in knowing whether the sophomore class went from here to here, but systemically, school-wide, what have been the initiatives? What are the kinds of things that are the focus of your attention to improve academic achievement? And then as we look at our 3-year plan, in another year or so, it will be time to look at whether the fruits of your labors are bearing fruit. But right now, it's too soon. That would be my thought. Does that make any sense?
Other comments?
We can provide you data from the fall NWEA to this second round this winter, so we can provide you that kind of information. Principals, do we have that being put together? What's our status there? I'm sorry that I didn't ask before this meeting.
Yes, we are. We're doing our first data days this Friday.
This Friday, okay.
Our first data days will happen this Friday for 2 grade levels, 3rd and 5th, I think, but don't quote me on that.
And would those compare? There are targets that are meant to be hit, you know, on those, or projected to be hit. And so if those were off the target, would that create conversation, do you think? If the standards weren't, the projected standards weren't there, would that allow for
better
conversation? Would it?
It better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, absolutely, Jason. I don't mean to be.
Oh.
Absolutely, it needs to. That's what should drive the curriculum discussion in our PLCs and our department meetings. Absolutely.
Okay. So first step in terms of, you have a data, I'm sorry, what did you call it, Trina? It was a
day-to-day.
Like a data day where the teachers will take a half day with our team teacher, Jen Gretzmacher, as well as some members from the TBA ISD to look at the data and see where students have grown since fall, or if they haven't, and maybe why not, and look at areas where we need to focus next.
Okay. And that, how often do those happen, the day-to-days?
A half day, we're looking at 3 times a year, so we did our first one in fall, so after each of the tests.
Okay. And is that, from the board, is that a tolerable cadence for us to review that? So it'd be every 3 times a year, we would essentially check that metric and say, how did we do in the testing and that sort of thing? That's how often this would come up, that we would bring this. So every 3rd or 4th meeting, we would talk about this.
And we could sure broaden that to hit the scope that Jenna is requesting as well.
I think that the to-do would be to, out of the day-to-day, potentially have something to bring back to us as a first discussion point. I guess in our, I don't know what meeting that would be.
Would we 1 month from tonight, blah, 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 blah. 1 month from tonight?
Yeah, because they're spread
at
out
our workshop
for the
meeting?
month of February, so they're not all like within the next week or 2, so they are spread out.
So whatever makes sense, I think, would be the best. So if you need a month, if it's a month lag behind the meeting or the actual testing, and that whatever date is good for you, we'll just have that as our follow-up date.
Okay, so I would say the first board meeting in March.
Yeah.
Either that or the workshop session, when we're going through the VTO, again, the workshop session each month. Bethany just made a great point. We're going to be focusing on curriculum. That night, it might be just a great dovetail into the discussion already being planned.
Nice.
Oh, awesome. We reviewed our key metrics in our one-year rocks, and just based on the metric thing, I think we moved this a long ways in a short period of time, at least for our next steps. So thank you. That's it. Yeah.
We do PSAT. And the PSAT test our students took in the fall, but they won't take that again until April. So if you're looking for a sort of hard objective growth figure, for example, that you can get from an NWEA, we don't have that data at this point. We are using, our staff are engaging in quarterly individual reflections on their student growth data, whether it's individual tests or ISD assessments or other metrics that they've individually identified. So I wouldn't be able to provide necessarily the same pre-post trends that the NWEA might be providing for the lower grades.
So Stephanie, if there was a number, if you were to say, hey, or maybe you need time to say, what's a number or two that really matter? You know, when you really think of the kids' educational and how how you would move that along. I mean, it's okay to say, we don't know that right now, but if you could define one or two and we start small and just start in a spot to say, this
Sure.
number right here is good enough for now for us to get moving on this.
When you say number, are you looking for test score numbers, or are you looking for participation of teachers in the process? Are you looking for, I mean, when we talk about those metrics, if for academic, it sounds like you're trying to drill down maybe to a specific test score. We can compare what the students last fall did to compare to what they did this fall. I could look at 10th grade last year versus 11th grade this fall, same cohort of students, but I mean,
I've got you moving pretty fast.
Sorry, okay.
For my perspective, just as one board member, it's the number that matters to you.
Okay.
And not necessarily a hard metric for performance.
Okay.
I think our key metric there was about academic achievement. That's a pretty broad statement in and of itself, and so
Right.
when you look for a metric, it's just about a number that would be, oh, we're reaching it and we're above this, or we're below, in terms of whatever context you find that in.
Sure.
It isn't necessarily a test score or anything like that, but it's something that you would say, man, I would love to know that the percentage of all of my kids do this thing, and that shows achievement here. And so for me, it's a very general thing, and it's more maybe from the heart than it is from a real specific thing. But again, that's my thing on a first blush here. We don't know the number,
Okay.
or we would have put it down.
Sure.
So it is a question of, searching potentially your staff and saying, what's something that we just would like to measure?
Mhm.
We want to see our kids climb over this. Maybe it's 100%.
Right.
Climb
Okay.
over the board or whatever. And to me, that's the what we're going for, is just a way to say, yeah, we're getting it done. We're getting it done.
Got it. Thank you.
The PSAT does do a nice job of letting us know what percentage of the class have hit that college benchmark standard for
Sure.
their age.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if we knew, every year whether more people in that class had reached benchmark successfully, the percentage was getting better and better. That's
Sure.
a nice indicator. It's not
Yes.
perfect, but none of them are.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Any other comments, you guys, on this?
I would also, excuse me, the SEL curriculum that you guys are using is new this year. Yeah. Okay. I feel like I would be interested to see the impact of that at some point, right? I mean, that might be next year, but that might be something that would be interesting for us to have that in the academic achievement key metric area. I think that is important stuff as well.
It's okay if tonight our to-do on this, Stephanie, is just by the time we have our next workshop meeting, you've had a chance to ponder the number. Okay, and that's good enough, so that when we come back to this next time, the academic achievement, it's like, hey, Stephanie, what have you thought about? What's your team thought about? Do you have something that you'd like to discuss on this one? So you own that number essentially, and we don't have it yet, and that's okay, all right? We had a year to get it together, all right?
I think it's helpful, like the way that you described it, so that it's not necessarily a hard number. It could be a percentage of somebody doing something, like you can sort of create whatever that is, and then the achievement of it is just based on that percentage. It doesn't, I was sitting here, except for what you were just talking about with the PSAT, that actually is a number, and that's kind of useful, but otherwise I was kind of scratching my head too, like what would be that number? But I like the way you're talking about just sort of creating a number out of a goal, out of a standard of achievement.
And for some people that works, for other people it's like, no, I need no number. Give me the number. Right? Okay, so that's so we have some to-dos. If you know what the to-dos, you mind reading them back so everyone's got them? Right. Okay, so that's Leanne's to do? Leanne, you got it? Got it. You just say got it. Got it. All right, we're good to go. Keep going. No, you got it? Got it. All right, okay.
It's done.
You read our minds. You are amazing. You're awesome.
That's great. That's why we do this.
The feedback from that.
Won't have them until the end. Won't be, yeah. It'll be the first one in March, workshop.
Yeah, with the goal of 3 times a year, that was, we discussed the goal 3 times a year, but the second meeting in March, you're gonna bring those back the first time.
Hold on. I just,
That's very important, I guess.
no, it is because what we're doing is we're making sure that we agree as what the to-do is, right? Because it was confused enough, so I just want to make sure Trina's like, I got it, I understand what we're doing. That's all, that's all. And sure, does that sound right? Got it. All right. Thanks, everybody, for dealing with it. It's awesome. Appreciate it.
Maybe Stephanie's is a way of describing our academic achievement, not necessarily our, measuring,
Yeah.
3 major metrics that I pay attention to right now for academic achievement. Sorry. So I look at 3, and what I was hearing you say is you're looking for a indication, and I sort of sum those up into, so I look at PSAT data, and then I look at advanced placement test score data, and I look at SAT benchmark data. I can bring you updates on each of those 3, and if you're looking for one number that sums up everything, I can say X percentage of students have demonstrated growth in one of 3. I'm going to bring you probably more than you're going to look for, and then you guys can decide what you want me to track 3 times a year, and I'm happy to do that.
It's wonderful.
Okay.
Good.
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 She already did.
Got it. I thought I heard you say it before. All right.
I'm just curious for a summary. So when in this process do we keep going through like the 3-year? When will we go through that again?
Yeah, so the next
Year?
time, again, there's a lot in this meeting tonight, to be fair.
So we'll go over it.
So what I would do typically is the next time we go through this, because we made a lot of headway on a lot of these things tonight, is I would ask, is there any other issues that we want to discuss off the VTO? So what we would do at that moment is just, that's a good time to look at the 3-year and say, hey, we really haven't talked about this at all this year. Can we talk about it here as an issue? So, and discussion is the same thing that we did, where it's like Rick and Leanne, just, they start to talk about what a first step would be. It's not necessarily timing important because it's a 3-year item, so any one meeting, I didn't think we had to hit those, but next time around, because what we'll do the next meeting is just review the to-dos. Are the to-dos done, not done? If there's a little presentation or sharing we need to do that, we'll do that at that time. We'll go back through the rocks and the metrics, and then I'll ask, do we have any other issues related to the right? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you. Right, on that note, we are going to, I'm going to do official adjourned.